What's that?
You'll have to read the comments. No one's going to know what that is.
Okay. Welcome to the Calligram podcast. I'm Izac.
And I'm Noah.
Today we're going to talk about Anatomy of a Fall.
Of a Fall.
This is a very good film.
I would agree with that. I would go so far as to say it's a great film.
Yeah, it is a great film.
I love this.
One of my favorites of the year for sure.
Yeah, that was awesome.
100%. Just straight off the bat. We were talking about it earlier, but I'll talk about it on record. So you were saying that you were surprised that Sandra Hüller got a late night TV interview.
Yeah, she was on Kimmel. I clicked it. I thought it was a joke, and I clicked it, and I was like, "Oh, she got interviewed by Jimmy Kimmel."
And I think it's funny that it's taken. I said this earlier, but I'll say it again now. It's funny that it's taken an actress to get into 2 Best Picture nominated films for American late night TV to care about European actresses.
It's true. And I'm not saying this like, oh, it's an achievement to be interviewed by Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just saying that like the fact that there's enough money in, or that, you know, NBC or whoever runs that late night show, that production company thought that buying a slot on that show would make more people go watch Anatomy of a Fall is interesting, because they're like, oh, people will sit through this. And it is somewhat in English.
Yeah, and I guess we're coming up on like award season's wrapping up.
Sure.
So makes sense. But yeah, that's funny. Like it's,
Because it's not where you would advertise something like
Absolutely
this.
not.
So it's just funny that happened. But
like no shot. If the lead actor of Drive My Car was on Kimmel, I'd be like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, she's in 2. Which is just, I mean...
The Parasite effect, man. That's what it is.
Thank God for Parasite.
Bong Joon-ho was interviewed.
Yeah.
A director, not even an actor in it, of a foreign... And
when have you seen that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Never.
Great. Anyhow, but it's good that she was on. She's lovely.
Interesting you mentioned foreign film too. Something interesting for Anatomy of a Fall, and we'll talk about the actual film itself, is, you know, Anatomy of a Fall is not nominated for Best Foreign Film? Do you know why it's not nominated?
No.
The director said some things about the French Prime Minister.
Cette année, le pays a été traversé par une contestation historique, extrêmement puissante, unanime, de la réforme des retraites. Cette contestation a été niée et réprimée de façon choquante. Et ce schéma de pouvoir dominateur de plus en plus décomplexé éclate dans plusieurs domaines.
And each country gets to put forward one film.
Ooh.
And so they intentionally overlooked Anatomy of a Fall to put it forward for Best Foreign.
But it's up for Best Picture.
Yeah, but not Best Foreign. Because the French government...
Oh, right.
Each country gets to put forward
one film up.
And so even though it won the frickin' Palme d'Or, right? It won the Palme?
Yeah. The Palme d'Or.
Yeah, the Palme d'Or.
Not the fashion.
Not Dior.
Yeah.
Christian, She let the way I did. Yeah.
I'm leaving that in.
Yeah. Yeah, fuck it. Even though it won the biggest award in most prestigious film festival in the world.
Well, that's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense, but it's also like, really?
I know, it's ridiculous. So if you're wondering why Best Picture nominated Anatomy of a Fall isn't
not up for foreign,
that's why.
But wouldn't they have to I guess they wouldn't have had to agree to put it up for Best Picture?
No, because that's something else.
That's so weird.
It's just the category.
What a stupid rule. Because if the French goal, the French government's goal was to stop Anatomy of a Fall from getting recognition.
Yeah.
What the hell did they think that was going to do? At least we can take one award away from it or something?
Yeah.
That was the idea?
I reckon they just would have assumed that there's no way that a foreign film would have been up for Best Picture, because it's like definitely more American-centric.
Sure, but we've had recent ones in recent years.
Yeah, but I guess they're like, well, maybe they thought there would have been a rollover effect or something. Maybe they, stopping Best Foreign, they would have overlooked it for Best Picture or something. But dude, because like Titane was not up for...
Sure.
Yeah,
but that's because it was...
It's super inaccessible.
Too controversial
Too
for
much
the Oscars.
in that one.
Yeah, I agree. Oscars don't like to nominate things that are violent and whatever. Yeah. It's just too hardcore for the Oscars, I guess. They prefer films like Green Book and The Holdovers, is what I'm saying. Yeah. They prefer movies that are very easily palatable to everybody. They prefer accessible movies.
Yeah, of course.
As opposed to challenging movies.
Yeah, and Titane is very challenging.
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, fun fact with that.
There you go. So should we get on to the actual movie?
Let's do it. Let's talk about the movie.
Cool.
I love it very much.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sandra Hüller gives her second fantastic performance in 1 year.
Yeah.
I didn't know who this woman was.
Yeah,
and,
I didn't know either.
Like, never heard of her.
Yeah, yeah.
And now I'm like mildly obsessed. And I need to see all of the films that she's ever been in.
I mean, I sometimes these European actresses just come up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And like I watch a lot of like foreign movies, so like I'm used to seeing people like this and give this sort of performance.
Yeah.
Well, my observation of this, because I've watched a lot of foreign movies, is everybody's just being like, oh my god, I didn't know somebody could act like they weren't in a movie. I didn't know somebody could do like a realistic before, and like, so that's kind of funny. Not to devalue her in the slightest, she did a fucking fantastic job. It's a fantastic performance, but it's just funny for people to see this sort of style of acting because I guess it's got a mainstream attention now because of Anatomy of a Fall. It's just like, oh yeah, people can just act like they're actually in existence as people as opposed to like doing some sort of Americanized version of acting, which is fine too for those styles of movies. But the movie's so naturalistic that it needed that sort of really real naturalistic performance. And she just acts like a person in the space. Completely believably. It's not one. I have zero criticism of anything she did. Actually, of basically any actor in the whole movie.
Yeah, that's one. I feel like that's like one of the standout elements of the film. There is not a single, even average performance.
I can't
in the whole
pronounce
damn movie.
his last name, but Nilo, the actor, who plays Daniel, is the greatest child performance of the decade. I can't think of a better child performance this decade so far. Either. It was phenomenal.
Certainly not that good.
He's insanely good.
Yeah.
And he should be up for Best Actor.
Yeah.
For supporting actor.
Is he actually blind?
No, I don't think he's actually blind. No.
Well, he fucking played that very well.
Which is hard to do,
all
too.
at the same time.
Yep.
That's a lot to think about for a little kid.
Yep. Yeah, he's awesome.
That scene with him and the dog.
Great scene.
Are you kidding
In
me?
every scene, even the subtle stuff, even the really, really hard stuff where he has... This is spoilers, by the way. We're going to spoil the whole movie.
Yeah. Go watch Anatomy of a Fall. It's out in cinemas.
The scene where he's got to, like, tell his mum that he wants her to leave, that she can't stay in the house, and he has to, like, he kind of depends a bit on the other... He's so brilliant. And Sandra said this when she was working with him, that he was, like, a very independent person, and much of the mother-son relationship that was between them, it was obvious to her that he, like, wanted his own space, and it wouldn't be like a cuddly, touchy sort of relationship, that he would be an independent. And she said basically because that's how Milo was in real life, that she let that establish the relationship that they would have. So she just let him do it, and she played off him.
Well, Milo is somebody who gives you a lot of freedom as an actor. You don't need to take care of him. That's the first thing. So I didn't have the feeling that I'm playing with a child. He's very mature, and he's very aware of his own space. He's very smart, and a very talented actor. So our relationship, or the relationship we have as mother and son in the film, basically came from his behavior, because he was so with himself. He wasn't somebody who would come over and want a hug or something. He was in his space. I let him be there. I thought maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's what they are. I didn't want to portray a mother who's all over the place with him, because that's not what she is doing. She's leaving space for everything that's going on. That's, for some people, that's a problem. For her husband, it is a problem, but it shouldn't be for her son. And I think that's what happened.
You totally buy the relationship, and I think it works really well for the film, because he has to be standoffish from her, because he doesn't know if she's killed somebody.
Yeah.
So
his dad.
He's killed his dad. Right. So there's that whole... Yeah, but I mean, he kills it in every single scene, no matter what he has to do. He's awesome.
Played the shit out of the piano as well.
Yeah, he did a good job.
Holy crap. I was looking for a double, and I was like...
No, he's really
playing. That little boy
he's
is
really
playing that piano.
It's note accurate.
Yeah.
It's great. Awesome. Love seeing note accurate music played in a film, as opposed to bullshit actors just put it and then put the track in post, and it's like, oh, well, they hit this, the time was right, therefore it's played. No, sorry.
Yeah, no, he really played it.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Speaking of good performances from things that maybe you wouldn't expect good performances from, that dog...
The dog gives a great...
...is one of my favorite parts about the film.
I agree.
Not being dramatic.
Great dog. Great performance
Very
from
good
the
boy.
dog.
Snoop.
Snoop.
It's a great name for it. Because it's not Snoopy.
No. He'll win, there's that like dog award thing, I can't remember where.
What, who gives those out?
I have no idea.
Oh, right.
but there's like some awards at festivals for like occasionally for like best animal actor or whatever. It's just a funny thing that they have those award shows. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, because all the other dogs' self-esteem will be hurt if they don't get it. He was a great dog. I don't know where to start with this, but I guess I'm trying to do the same thing we did with the Poor Things episode. It's like, let's talk about technical shit first and the movie afterwards.
Cool.
So the scene that everybody brings up, the argument in the kitchen.
Oh man, I love that.
That was shot over 2 days with 2 cameras, and they always ran it from the beginning to the end of the take.
Cool.
And Sandra said she loved that because it let them do different versions of it. The energy always carried.
They can build up momentum.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So we always started from the beginning, and it was always a complete run through, 2 cameras most of the time, so that we could really sit in this situation. And we had 2 days to shoot it. We had very long takes. We had 2 cameras. We were very free in our movements that we decided together before. So there was no placement from Justine where she told us, you start here and you start there, and then I want you to do that. It's kind of our way of working, which I very much enjoy.
And one of my favorite filmmaking decisions in the film is that while that argument is playing in court, and you hear the 2 people argue with each other, that we're watching the argument in real time, which I think helps a lot, as opposed to just listening to a tape for 4 or 5 minutes. And then as soon as the argument becomes physical...
Yeah, they cut away.
We cut away. And it's brilliant because, well, you don't have to shoot the scene.
Yeah,
but the other...
logistically, the producer's going, hallelujah.
Yeah, but the other brilliant thing about that is that, if you're listening to a tape of 2 people talk, and you know what those 2 people's voices sound like, which is basically every tape in existence, unless they have identical voices, you know who's talking.
Yeah.
But the moment that physical violence starts happening in the tape, you don't know what's happening. And so the movie decides to put you in the same perspective as everybody else in that courtroom by cutting away the moment the physical violence
Which is a very consistent theme in the film.
Yeah. You
So
don't
that
know
you
who's
don't
doing
know
what.
What really happened.
Yep.
Yeah.
And because you don't know who's sitting here, and then Sandra even does that brilliant thing. She says something that that the writers thought was like, that's him punching a wall and hitting himself.
Oh yeah.
Which is great.
That was
Which is a great thing to stick in
and
that
she
script.
like admits to the first slap, so it's like, okay, so you're admitting to something.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like it's not just you're in full deniability, which would raise suspicion.
It's brilliant. Whether you trust her or not, whatever she said makes sense.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect writing. Great writing. So I really like that decision, that that's the moment we chose to cut out. And Sandra said, by the way, that they didn't have a fight. They just made the noises in front of a microphone, and that's what they used. I liked how the courtroom stuff was shot. I found some of the editing and decisions about like when they cut to like handheld and stuff but I think I prefer that to like how I've seen other courtroom stuff done where it's boring. And I saw an interview with Justine Trier. That's a bad pronunciation, but we know what I'm talking about, where she said, it's a stupid idea to think that because a place is symmetrical, that you have to shoot it symmetrically.
Yeah. And they only really use the symmetry when they're trying to like emphasize the scale of the situation, I guess. Like there's that shot straight on down the alley when when they're building up to the point where the son is going to give his testimony.
Yeah.
They like establish like how intimidating the space looks. Yes. It's not like small and intimate and between 2 people. There's a huge jury of people listening.
It helps to the idea that he has to go up there and say what he's going to say.
Talking in front of a lot of people.
And it's scary because he's like 12 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like suffering from PTSD.
Yeah. And he's partially blind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's well shot for sure.
Yeah.
I liked a lot of the little opening tracking shots up the stairs and down to the car and things just on Steadicam. I was just thinking, that's kind of a shallow lens and that's kind of steep stairs. So good on the camera.
Yeah, wow.
For doing those. They're nice little shots. I like them.
I like that shot. If we're talking about particular shots, I like the one that like shoots through. It looks like it's out of freaking Evil Dead 2. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
when it shoots towards the
living
bin,
room and to the couch.
Yeah. And there's one where it goes to the bin, and I think there's like pills.
The pills, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good shot.
Mean, that was just very cool.
Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
Even the shots where they're like thinking about what might have happened at the crime scene, and you get that shot of Sandra up on the balcony, pushing the husband off or trying to.
Oh yeah.
Nice stuff.
Yeah.
And I liked when Sandra and the lawyer, I think, are watching the dramatic recreation at her house where they throw the dummy off the balcony. That you get the shot from where she is with the lens from that point of view. I always like that stuff. Helps you be in it with
with her.
Sandra, yeah.
Yeah.
And the lawyer, yeah.
Absolutely.
The opening of the movie obviously links to everything. She's talking to that writer.
Yeah.
And that writer says...
they're discussing representation in art versus what really
and they're writing
happened,
about
and
fiction
I was like,
how can you make fiction?
yeah.
And she says, like...
Which is a perfect... Well, I mean, it's what happens in the film. You have to believe someone's story.
Yeah.
Because we can't be there in the room to see what actually happened.
That's it,
I mean, that's just very clever.
Yep. The journalist is like, can you only write from experience?
Yeah.
And Sandra says, I would only need an interest in you to write about you. I can make up the rest. Which says a lot. I mean, about the media as well, and about everybody at home making their mind up. Like, we can make our mind up about Sandra. We don't need to have ever met her. And the journalist says, well, you need to have met me to develop an interest in me, blah, 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 that sort of thing. But, you can meet somebody on a TV screen. They haven't met you, but they've introduced themselves to you. So you can run with whatever narrative you like.
Yeah. It's a really cool opening too, because it's like any good script, events and things that happen, they have 3 or 4 different purposes.
Yeah.
And it could be easy for a writer to go in and go, okay, I want something that can establish early on that this film is about believing stories and not strictly the events. And then you would, forget about the interviewer and she would just never pop up again. And I've seen movies that do stuff like that.
Yeah.
But not only does she pop up again, she pops up in court. Her sexual chemistry with her is revealed. And then that's how you learn that Sandra Hüller's characters had affairs.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's like, what a great, and then you get to listen to the recording again.
Yep.
And it's like, it's just perfect. And then hearing that conversation about that in the court is really interesting to put that statement in that setting.
Yeah.
I love PIMP by 50 Cent that plays throughout the interview. That wasn't always this, it was meant to be Jolene.
Yeah.
By Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
Well, as I'm saying,
which would have fit thematically with like, is somebody stealing?
Of course,
somebody's...
yeah. Jolene, don't steal my man.
Yeah, right.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But PIMP, I laughed a lot.
Yeah, it was a very.
When it happened.
It was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool instrumental version. It like sounds really European. Like,
I think the reason that I liked it was because it was really annoying.
Yeah.
And like that's the whole point. Or like, well, it establishes like this. If she was gonna kill him. Like there's only one reason you would play that song. If it was Jolene, it would be one thing. It would be sending one sort of message. But I kind of like that the message is more ambiguous. It's because he's just playing music to drown her out. And it's really obnoxious. And the song sounds really annoying.
Yeah, and it plays on a loop.
Yeah, and it plays on loop.
For freaking ages.
Yeah.
I mean, what an opening.
Yeah, it was great.
And then the little boy goes for a walk, and then a lot of stuff happens. And then we spend the whole film
trying to figure out
wondering what happened. Yep.
That bit on the TV where the 2 people on the TV program are discussing whether she did it or not, or whatever. And it ends with that guy who's the co-writer of the movie making a little cameo.
Really?
Yeah. Justine Triet's partner in real life is him. So they wrote it together.
No way.
Yeah, which is kind of funny.
Writing that with your partner.
Yeah, they wrote the movie. Yeah.
They must have a strong relationship.
Well, that's what everybody says.
Yeah.
I've seen interviews where they play off each other loud, like in the crowd when they're on festival tours and whatnot, and they seem like they're having a ball.
They must, because an insecure couple trying to write that story,
no. They're having so much fun with it.
You would crumble.
Oh yeah, 100%. They talk over each other. They don't give a they're having fun.
I don't know if people know, but you are partners too. So it's...
That's it.
Now you know.
He's alive, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's great watching them play off each other.
That's really cool.
They like talk over each other and make fun of the fact that they were doing it, and like apparently they were writing it at a certain point, just sending emails to each other from different rooms in the house, working individually on it. It's pretty fun. Anyhow, there are bits in it where like it's obviously like getting a bit meta in court. There's like some line about, I write fiction so that I can uncover the truth, and can a writer only write from this? And it's like, it's getting real meta. Apparently that argument scene in the kitchen they did 60 drafts of.
Justine and Atua told me that they had 60 written versions of that scene. She knew that if we would fail, the whole film you could just forget it.
Yeah, get it right. I believe it.
I believe it.
It's a great argument.
It's It's like her best actress. It's her Oscar scene.
Oh yeah, it's the Oscar scene for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I like her acting towards the end most. I think that scene in the bar where she cups the lawyer's face, and which apparently was directed, like the exact action of it, and all that sort of tension towards the end of it, how she's acting between her and her son, all that unspoken stuff, works really well for me. I love that stuff. I like the scene where they're playing a fourth prelude on the piano, the duet between him and his mum.
And he just stops halfway through.
Yeah, he can't do it. He gets up and leaves. It's also interesting because Chopin requested that be played at his funeral, which kind of fits in a way. It's a thematic thing for two people to be playing together if their relationship's going to be over shortly.
Yeah, so, and they're both mourning the same person.
Yeah, that too. I love that he just gets up and he can't do it. The stuff with the lawyer was really good. I love that their relationship is explored just enough to know that they've had something in the past, and by the time you get into the bar at the end, and you don't know what's going to happen, if they're going to continue or not continue, and it's left perfectly, that idea that they should not kiss or not do anything, and it's just left as like this ambiguous thing. It's like, yeah, neither of them, especially her, she's not ready to get into anything right now, which is a good decision. And also, it's this, the ethics of this and the moral of this, and it's really well left there. I think respectfully left there. Apparently, there was an earlier version of the script where there was like a whole love story, and they actually, like, there were scenes in the script where like they're in bed in the past, and in the future there's a kiss and like the whole thing. And one of the producers on the film, apparently, Sandro said this in an interview, said, "Oh, cut it out, it's so 80s." And they took it out completely. And it's a great decision. It's so much better that you don't know if they're going to sort of end up together, or the extent of their prior relationship or any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It helps a lot that it's just like this floating thing. That's like, oh, is it going to be there? It adds another layer of like tension to the whole thing. Love it.
Yeah.
Good decision to cut all that stuff out. I would have, and it's long enough, to be honest. 2.5 hours of this is long enough.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's cool that there was that love story there, because obviously it's like heavily implied, but you can really feel that there's like another film happening at the same time, like their relationship before maybe she's met her husband, when she knew him earlier on.
Sure,
like you can kind of see them like hanging out together.
Yeah.
And like you have those thoughts because you see those old photos of Sandra Hüller and like her husband.
Yeah.
And you're like, I was kind of looking for like the lawyer in the background, because I'm thinking, I mean, like, was he a friend?
Sure, yeah.
Did he go to the same college, if that's where they met, or... Yeah, it's very cool.
And he's also like has to reevaluate his opinion of her as well, because he has to defend her from a professional point of view.
Yeah.
But I love when she says like, "Look, stop! I didn't kill him."
Yeah.
And his response to that is to like wait like a good 10 seconds, and he's like,
I love that pause.
And then he goes, "That's not the point."
Yeah.
It's like a dodge.
You have to start considering this from other people's perspective. I think is his big line.
But he's also evaluating it in his head. He's like, when I knew her, was she capable of doing this?
Yeah.
Type thought is going through his head.
You can kind of see, like, there's a bit of fear on his face as well, because it's like, I'm in this house with you.
Yeah, exactly.
We're in the same house. We're isolated in the sandy hill, in like the snowy hills.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually, like, maybe I'm in danger.
Sure,
It's just a little bit.
And I think his opinion changes by the end of it, it seems to me. It seems to me that by the end of it, he doesn't think that she did it.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that's where it starts from. It's like, oh, she could have killed her last husband. Do I, And then he ends up falling for her anyway, I think.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
He what does he say? He has that one thing, he has the big pause, and then he says something along the lines of like, "I know you didn't do it, but it doesn't make any sense for this to be an accident. So we have to push this as a suicide. That's the smartest strategy."
Yeah, right.
And you can see that she's like, it's really obviously the best result for her throughout the film is that it's ruled a suicide.
Yeah.
Which is wild for Sandra's character. Like, that's best case scenario is to come to terms with the fact that, well, not her personally, but to convince the world that her husband like killed himself.
Yeah. There's a lot of people...
It's very depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in it that is centered around having to convince yourself of something in order to continue living and like be alive. By the end of the film, it's pretty obvious, like the anatomy of the fall is not, well, it is, of course, somebody falling outside. But the courtroom drama and the personal drama of it is dissecting the fall of not only their marriage, but also of her reputation specifically, and then by extent the fall of the mothers and sons relationship, and that's the only family that either of them seem to have left.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's the anatomy of the breaking up of the whole relationship.
Right.
And the other relationships that have also, she's fallen in public reputation. The son's no longer has any parents, pretty much, that he can trust.
Yep.
So everything's, anyhow, I'll unpack this, but yeah, there's a thing that is like alluded to this idea when she's in the courtroom and they're talking about Milo's, the character's name's Daniel's blindness. And she says that line about the fact that I never wanted Daniel to view himself as being handicapped, because once you view yourself as being handicapped, your life is no longer your own life.
Yeah.
It's like out of your control now.
Yeah.
And he should have control over it because it's the only one he's got, is her point. Yeah.
People lean on a crutch sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah.
But she has to believe that he's not handicapped or convince herself to not believe
Yeah.
because she's partially responsible for him going blind.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like she's chosen, what we were saying about poor things before, it could be a retroactive justification for her behavior. It's like she has to believe that he's still going to be capable of living a normal life.
Yeah.
Because if she doesn't believe that, then she has to admit that she sort of is responsible for her son going partially blind, which is something she might not be able to accept. So it's this whole idea of like, you have to decide what you're going to believe in order to continue. It's like a self-preservation thing rather than a believing the truth of what happened type thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's very interesting. That's a huge,
And yeah.
Yeah, huge event in the film.
Right. It's the precursor for me to Milo choosing what he has to believe about her and about his father. Like he has to make up those decisions for himself. He has to choose one narrative or another.
And that guardian that gets assigned to him to make sure that there's no manipulation at home.
Yes.
She has that discussion with him. She says, because he says that he doesn't know, and she says, you don't have to believe, you just have to decide.
Yeah, he says, so I have to pretend to believe something.
Yeah.
And she says, no, you don't pretend to believe it. You make a decision to believe something or not. You have to decide, which is
a hell of a, it's definitely talking to the audience a little bit there as well.
Yeah. Sandra said in an interview, she said that there was no truth was reached in the courtroom. They just made a decision.
What if he would ask the question one day, what is the truth really? Because they didn't find out in court. They just made a decision.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what the truth is. They don't. They just chose to believe Daniel's story.
Yeah.
And obviously the jury took that and that swayed the decision greatly. He saved his mum's life, pretty much.
Telling us, talking about the dogs.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to die someday.
Yeah, that story of, whether or not...
with no witnesses in the car, apart from one man who's dead and the person on the stand.
Yeah. So this is like linking to the idea that, obviously, this is an obvious thing that I'm sure plenty of people have pointed out, but Daniel's partially blind because he has to continue to live with partial blindness psychologically.
Yeah, right.
Because he has to live with this idea that if he accepts one narrative or the other, he's choosing to forego one of these stories for the other one. He has to make a decision on if I accept that my mother killed my father, well, that's that. I don't have any, I have no parents anymore. It's over. And if I accept that my father committed that means that he didn't want to be around me and he was totally free to abandon me and himself. So no matter what he chooses, he's stuffed. But he has to accept one narrative or the other. And it might be the case that neither are true. His father might have actually just fell.
Yeah, by accident.
It really could be the case.
Yeah.
And the reason that that's still left open for me is because I don't know, man, if I'm trying to jump out of a window and off myself, I'm choosing a higher window.
Yeah.
And also the fact that his head knocked on the thing, it's you think that if someone was planning to commit suicide, they would do a better job of picking a point to jump from. And then the other thing that is funny is that if his dad had chosen to commit suicide, he would have known, or have known, that his son might find the body.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty horrific thing to do to a kid.
100%.
And this is the thing that Sandra Hula said in the interview, where she was the one thing she couldn't accept was that Milo would have to find the body if she did kill him. Because if she did kill him and push him off there and die, she would have had to have made the decision that, right, I can't be the one to find the body, it has to be Milo.
Yeah.
So she would have had to have done that to her kid. And she said, of all the things that she could accept in the screenplay, that was the one thing she couldn't accept. The idea that she would have to have had her son find the body.
Sociopathic.
Yeah, right.
I think she is somebody who had the capacity to do something like that. I always stopped in my imagination when I had to imagine that she would take into account, that she would like accept the fact that the son would find the father in the snow. That is so cruel. I can't like wrap my head around this thought. Everything else I could somewhat imagine, that she's so cruel or fed up or whatever, all these things, but not this.
But we have to accept that if we want to believe that she's a murderer. And I think that, to be honest, she does a pretty good job. Like, by the end of the movie, I'm sitting there pretty contently saying, I think this person's capable of murder, and I think that they also could be innocent and being screwed. I think it works itself out really nicely by the end, where I don't think it's written in such a way where it skews one way or the other enough for me to buy it.
Yeah.
So it's good, I think.
I think it does it does an incredible exploration of the fact that normal people under strenuous emotional circumstances are capable of pretty much anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And like, we're going to talk about zone of interest later.
Yeah, of course.
Huge.
Yeah, right. Yeah. With Daniel's story in the courtroom, there's like a few layers to it. So like the first thing that could be suggested is he wants to save his mum. He comes up with that decision, right? And then he goes, I need to invent a story. I could make it up completely.
Yeah.
Or it did happen. So the first question is like, is the story real? Yes or no? And if we accept, yes, it's a real story. If no is easy. It's like, no, then he's just saving his mum. Yes, it's real. Okay. Is Daniel just assuming that conversation that he had with his father was actually about his father talking about himself?
Very true.
Or was it about the dog? And he could be filling in gaps in his memory, or because, your memory's not accurate. He could be filling in gaps saying like, oh no, he actually said it like this, and he was definitely talking about himself. And is he interpreting what he wants to hear from that conversation in order to justify that it was his father's suicide, or did it happen at all?
Yeah.
And no matter which one of those four possibilities you take I think it is totally reasonable. It makes perfect sense for the narrative of the movie. So.
And it breaks off, the narrative in the story breaks off like tree vines.
Yeah.
Because like even leading up into that point, earlier up on the branch, you get Sandra Hüller as her character. What's her character's name?
Sandra,
that's right. Yeah, right. I remember
she did it on purpose because you wrote it for her, so she just left the name.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
She mentions, she's like, oh yes, he was on depressants, and like you can see that it's only after the lawyers brought up the fact where he goes, your best chance of getting out of this is if it's a suicide, because if you push for accident, it's just not going to happen.
Yep.
And she calls up and she goes, oh no, I think it might have been a suicide after the fact.
Yeah.
After she'd initially pushed for accident. And then she goes, I remember one night I found him and he'd, thrown up on the ground and he was drunk on the floor. And that story comes up immediately after she hears that it's better for her chances.
Yeah, later.
And then based on that story, then you get Milo's interpretation of the pills and the dog eating the pills and
I think it's presented
if a lie, one lie begets another. If you're looking at it in that way,
absolutely.
Which is very interesting.
But it's also totally believable that she just happened to think about, did he actually do it? You know what I mean?
Totally. Well, and I mean, like, you look at, it's very sad, like in a lot of instances of suicide, like some depressed people, they're incredibly good at not showing it.
Sure.
Yeah. And there's a thing with, like very suicidal people.
Yeah.
When they're near the end, they're extremely calm.
Yeah.
Because they feel like, and it's obviously can't speak for everyone.
Yeah.
But because like the weight's off their shoulders.
Yeah, right.
So you would never pick someone who's like jolly, like.
No, you can't tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, no matter what state somebody's in, you'd never know.
Yeah.
And it kind of is believable for her too, because her personality in the film is kind of distant and kind of cold for the majority of it. Yeah. And so you would believe that she wasn't so involved or even had time for her husband's life and however he was feeling. Like, they would click later for her, like, oh, maybe he was I didn't pay enough attention or something. You know what I mean? So you can believe it either way you want, that she, maybe she just didn't realize. It's totally believable. She just didn't realize he was. So once that comes up, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is. which is great.
And you can look at it as well. It's like, it's not just her trying to be innocent is also not just for her benefit. It's to make sure that Daniel has a parent.
Sure. Yeah, right.
So you can look
What's
at
he
it from
gonna
the
do?
desperation from that angle too.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not just, you know.
And no matter what, whether she killed him or not, she still loves her son, and it's obvious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Daniel's story about the dog and the fact that
The pills?
No, the dog. Like
Oh,
when he's
right.
talking about
Oh.
his father, like at
Like,
the end of the monologue. he
yeah,
gives.
talking about like, you know, your dogs, you know, Snoop is going to die one day and you're going to have to accept it.
The dad is like, you know, comparing himself to a dog, basically, is what's
Yeah.
happening. Like putting himself in the place of Snoop. Reminds me of the bit earlier in the film, this line I like, where Sandra's talking to the lawyer outside by the fire and she says, I can't trust anybody until I can visualize an animal's head on them. And I thought that was interesting because she's basically using, I mean, apart from the fact that it links to the idea that the father is the dog, or the father is comparing himself to the dog.
Yeah.
Meaning that, you know, inadvertently the movie's telling us he's trustworthy, or somewhat at least, I guess, if you want to take it that way.
I think so.
Yeah, or that maybe Daniel's doing the same thing where he's going like, I can see my father as this dog and therefore I trust him because I trust the dog and the dog's a reliable source of information. Even if I run an experiment on the dog, then it is a reliable source, you know what I mean? So he's like doing that thing, the same thing his mum's doing or whatever. That whole thing where she's like, I can't trust anybody till I put an animal's head on them, is total, like, that's completely like a coping thing. Like, that's a fantasy she's creating to be like, I can trust you if I can put an that's completely arbitrary. It's like, there's no logic to that in the slightest. And it's funny that she uses that strategy, that imaginary strategy, to see whether she can trust someone or not. She's like imagining an animal. She's using a fictional animal to test, and he's using a real life animal to test if he can trust her or not. Because he runs that experiment on the dog.
On the dog.
And goes like, oh, is the dog, you know, the dog is the thing that lets him justify his decision in saying that because the dog ate the poison and smelt the same way, therefore my dad could have committed suicide by extension. That's the whole idea.
And it's good early foreshadowing as well that Daniel is potentially able to shift the truth in favor of one story. When they ask him about, oh, I know all the surfaces in the house my dad put textured tape on corners so that I know I was definitely underneath the window.
Yeah.
And then he realizes that he can't hear the argument and he goes, oh no, I was inside. And you're like, but you said that you swore that you always knew the difference. And he's like, oh no, I got mixed up.
So his practical experimentation is not reliable.
It's not 100% and already been disproven. One of one.
Maybe that's why he wants to do the dog in real time, right? Because he's not sure if he can remember. And now that he knows that he screwed the tape thing up and he can't remember that properly, maybe the dog thing isn't probably, so he needs to test it on the dog again.
Yeah.
I think what that thing showed me, with the contrast of her saying she's imagining animals and him doing a practical test on an animal, is that whether you choose empirical, practical, arguably scientific experiments to determine whether or not you need to trust somebody or not, or you just visualize an animal's head on them and say, oh yeah, I can trust you because I'm inventing it in my brain.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you are making a decision. You can collect all the empirical evidence in the world, but at the end of the day, you still have to believe the empirical evidence. You still have to make the decision to believe the evidence. And no matter which method you use, completely fictional with zero justification, or as much justification as you could possibly do, like going to like killing your dog basically, or risking the death of your dog to do it, you have to make the decision. I'm not saying that like empirical evidence is bullshit and it should be dismissed, but I'm not saying these are equal things. But what I am saying is you still have to make the decision.
Yeah.
You still have to call it. Like, science is only as good as it gets. It just proves what it proves. It's not, it's what it is. It's decision making. It is. You have to make the decision to believe something. You can't pretend to believe in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
And it's like, the thing with the animal head makes me like, and maybe I'll get hate on this, fuck it. It's like people who think their personality is like dictated by a star sign.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a coping mechanism.
Oh yeah, but people believe it.
Yeah.
You know.
It's you're not looking at.
But it helps people. Like, it helps people put a belief system into something. I think.
Yeah. I mean, very true.
Yeah. If you can categorize people by whatever method you do, it makes your life easier. Yeah. If it's bullshit, it makes your life easier.
Yeah, for sure. It makes it in here makes your life easier.
Sure.
Yeah, it's more simple.
Yeah. And then when the star sign doesn't line up with their personality, and
Mercury must
you
be.
just go, oh yeah, exactly. Like, it's just in a different.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. But that's them. That once again, it's a retroactive justification. It's like I need to believe something about you so I can trust you. So I'm just going to believe that you're a Leo, or I don't know, and therefore I can trust you type
Yeah,
thing.
gotcha.
It's like it's the same thing that Sandra's doing with the blindness. She's like, I believe that he's not handicapped, so I don't have to feel bad about myself. I believe I trust you because you're a Scorpio with an Aries rising. I don't know
right.
anything.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But that's why I'm going to believe you.
Yeah.
I
think
also visualizing an animal's head right now.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah.
a dog, because I got that dog in me. Moving on. So I love those memes. Have you seen those memes where it's like the dog, I've got that dog in me, and it's got an X-ray with like a chihuahua, and it's like, this is the dog in me. Anyway.
Damn.
Mum humor.
That's
hot though.
That's amazing.
That's good. You know what I think is cool too is when Daniel asks, he says like, can you go away? Mm-hmm. I need to be alone.
Yeah.
Daniel, obviously, his two possibilities here, his decision is like, okay, so my dad committed suicide and I'll be with my mum.
Yeah.
Or my mum is a murderer and I have to be either with this woman or in foster care or full stop without my mum in my life.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that he steps away and just takes a little bit to experience what it's like not having his mum around the house. And I think it's totally plausible that maybe the fact that he misses his mum with that time away is what eventually pushes him to have the experiment with the dog. Like, distance makes the heart grow fond, and also it's like, you're a kid, it's your mother. Of course you miss your mother.
Yeah.
So I think that played into it hugely.
Very, very plausible. Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I like this quote from Justine Thier.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be able to say her name
you're,
properly.
You're pronouncing it better than I would, I think.
She said in one of the film festival press conferences, towards the end of it, she was like, she said in her head a little bit, it's also like, because of the father's, whether he was murdered or whether it was a suicide or whether whatever, whichever one, at the end of the day, he's caused Sandra so much grief that he sort of won anyway. He sort of wins in the end, no matter which one it was, because it's true. Like, the whole world sort of hates her. It's either her son hates her or the world hates her. So no matter what, he's kind of, the suicide means that he's won. Jeez. His death means that he's won,
Yeah.
The main thing is in the argument scene, he asked for more place, many things, and I think he put her in a very bad situation with his death. So he win in a way.
It's like the oh no, I'm not going to spoil The Hunt. Never mind.
No.
I was going to compare it to The Hunt for a sec, but and I'm
We
sure
should talk about The Hunt.
you know what
that
I mean.
episode would
At
go.
some point we'll talk about.
That's not a controversial film or anything.
Yeah. No.
I love The Hunt. It's genius.
Yeah,
I've not met one person who I've told to watch The Hunt who didn't love it.
Yeah. The Hunt. I was anyway. I felt sick.
By the way, we're speaking about Thomas Vinterberg's The Hunt, and not that other movie called The Hunt. Which,
who did the other one?
The political one where they like hunt people in the forest.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Don't. But Thomas Vinterberg's The Hunt is awesome.
I haven't seen the other one, but how could it be better than
it's not
The Hunt?
The conversation that Daniel has with the minder, obviously in the snow.
Yeah.
Where they're talking, she says,
about make a decision.
Make a decision to believe what you're going to believe. She says it's about deciding to believe something and then believing it, which means putting that into action, right? Belief is like action. Like, if you believe something, you're going to act that belief out. That's what that means, right? So if this relationship with his mum continues the way that it is, where they're like standoffish forever, he doesn't really believe the decision that he made, even in that courtroom, right?
Yep.
If he's trying to convince himself that the dad committed suicide so he can trust his mum again, that isn't sufficient, because people's beliefs, like, they don't have to be conscious to be beliefs. That's my point. He could just be, no matter what he says, he's not believing it. He doesn't have to believe it. He's just saying stuff. It's not that his decision is made, maybe practically in the real world, in that courtroom, like, he's made a decision to say this thing. But that doesn't mean that he believes his mum didn't kill his dad. That doesn't mean that. He doesn't know still. Even by the end of the movie, he doesn't know. I think it's obvious that he doesn't know, and he doesn't trust her still. I think that's clear.
Yeah. Man, what a sad ending. It's very.
It's the saddest ending of the year, maybe.
very-
well, I mean,
yeah.
there's the Zone of Interest.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
but this is the second saddest ending of the
yeah,
year.
yeah, I agree. I think it does safely sit second to Zone.
The thing that I love about the ending, he has, and Sandra said this, and I agree with her. I thought this as well, and then I heard her said it. By the end of their relationship, by the end of the film, he has the power in the house, because regardless of whether she did kill him or he committed suicide, he saved her with that story in court. He like that's the thing that skewed it. I think is the implication. Absolutely.
Their relationship has changed completely. And also I think maybe the boy even has more power now than she has in the house. There was a shift, and she knows about this shift. And nobody knows if he invented the story. That doesn't mean she's guilty, but it still means he would have lied to save her. All these things are in the air, and how hard would it be to talk about this, to find out how they can start to live together again.
And so he now has the power in their relationship. And I think that's displayed visually very well by the way that they hug each other at the end, because she's consoling him in bed earlier and she's on top of him holding him.
And his head is above her.
Yeah, she puts her head in his chest basically, and he holds her like it's like she's the child now in the relationship, or he's in charge. And it's really interesting because they cut part of the ending out that was in the script, which I learned, which I found was very interesting. There was a part in the script in that scene that they filmed where Daniel, I keep saying the actor's name, Daniel says to his mum in that bedroom apparently, promise me that you won't put me in any of your books in the future. Oh. And she says, I can't do that. I can't promise you that.
There was a version of that last scene with the son when she wants to leave, where he says that he doesn't want her to use him as material. She had to promise, and she says she can't. So that was what we actually played, and she just took the silence, which I find the right decision. But they were actually discussing how this would go on, and she would stick to her process. Yeah, I understood, but I also understand that she chose otherwise.
Whoa!
Yeah, and they cut it out. And I think it was a good decision to cut it out because it makes her seem so cold and so heartless that I would have to believe that she killed her husband to do it. So I'm really glad it's cut out. But it was just an interesting thing.
It's a really interesting scene.
It is.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad they cut it.
It doesn't serve the whole device.
It would have tipped the scale too far for me.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad they cut it out. And there's a Sandra quote from an interview where she says sometimes she fantasizes that the house would just be full of people so that they wouldn't have to live just with each other. So they wouldn't have to talk and have to deal with it, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was cool.
I really don't know how they live together. Sometimes I have the fantasy that there will be a lot of people in the house just so they don't need to be just the two of them. Yeah.
That's the end of my notes.
Yeah, oh, fair enough. Well, I mean...
Did you want to talk about your thing that you heard about?
Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. So I heard Sandra Hüller asked the director, so is my character guilty or not? And Justine refused to say, which we were talking about this over lunch. I've done the tiniest bit of acting. I've done a bit more of directing. At least in my experience, directing actors, the actors that I've worked with, they've liked to have an inner dialogue. And so for them to make informed decisions on like the identity of the character, knowing things like, are you angry? Are you hiding anger? Are you know, what's happening on the inside? And knowing one way or the other, is Sandra guilty or is Sandra not guilty, would inform two different ways to play the character. And when I heard that Justine, who's obviously a phenomenal director and clearly someone I have a lot to learn from.
She's like, awesome.
Clearly, you know, me saying after having one short film, I didn't, like, I can't see, I imagine myself on set with, like, let's just say Joel, who I've worked with quite a lot, the most. If he said to me, so did I do it or not? And I said, well, I won't tell you. I'd feel like I'm risking his performance coming across as confused. because he doesn't know if he's playing, you know, guilt, and I guess there'd be guilt with it. It's an interesting thing with the fact that it's between a murder and a suicide and being so close to someone, is that of course you would feel guilt either way, because even if you didn't physically kill the person, you would feel guilt that you didn't support them enough that they would want to continue to live.
Sure.
So I guess that works in their favor. That's one thing where I was like, okay, well that makes sense that you wouldn't need to tell, because its guilt would be consistent, just the type of guilt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was very interesting, just because if Joel said that to me, I would feel like I should give him an answer so that he can know, and so he can be like, okay, well that will mean that I do these things, or that will mean I will do these things.
Sure.
Anyway, and I know you have a lot of thoughts on this as well.
Yeah. So my experience with this has been the same with actors as it has been with everybody else I've discussed arbitrary endings with.
Yeah.
Most actors that I've talked to, and most people I've talked to, don't seem to understand or don't seem to be able to accept the idea that a script can be written in multiple ways for multiple endings to have just as much validity. And that there is no truth. That the whole point is that multiple things could be true, and that's the answer. But people don't like being told that something arbitrary is an answer. They don't like it. But it's true, and that's the truth.
Yeah,
so
no, totally.
The way in which they've got around this is like, I won't spoil this movie, and it's on my mind because I will bring it up when we talk about the zone of interest. But there's a movie called The White Ribbon by Mika Haneke, which is phenomenal. Well, the best movie of the decade for me.
Yeah.
Of its decade.
I haven't seen it, but
that's okay. I'm not going to spoil it.
Haneke, so
basically, there's a mystery in the film, and it's did somebody do this? Did people do this thing or not? And there's a good interview where Darren Aronofsky is interviewing Haneke, or Haneke. I'm going to say Haneke because I feel better about it, because that's not how you say his name. Anyhow, he's interviewing Haneke, and he asks Haneke, did they do it or not? And Haneke says maybe.
Okay, the big question.
Oh.
Do you know who did it?
Maybe.
And Aronofsky says, I have my own theory, but I'm not going to give you an answer, whatever. And he says, when you're directing the people in the film, do they know? Do you tell them?
That's what I'm really interested by. Because I know that you can, like, because I've written, I'd like to think, we'll see how the audience likes it, but like, I think co-stars, you can read it two ways.
Sure.
But it's the directing two ways for talking to an actor, for seeing what they have to pull from. So that's very interesting.
This is the way you get around that, in my opinion. Haneke says, said to Darren, when you're directing what to do, he just said, they just must simply say it in a manner that seems truthful so that the audience will believe them. Yeah. It's a sign of bad films when the audience is supposed to know when somebody is lying.
Are they playing one level, or are they playing something more complex? Are they telling the truth?
That's your decision.
When you direct them, do you direct them very simply and give them something simple, knowing that audiences will read into it?
They should simply say it in a manner that's credible, so the audience will believe them. It's a sign of bad films that the audience always is supposed to know when someone's lying.
And that's the truth. If I'm watching a performance and I can tell somebody is lying, then it's a bad performance. Because it's not interesting anymore, because it's dull, because it sucks. Like, if two people are having a conversation in a movie and your character just starts bullshitting, and we know that it's bullshit, I mean, it might work for a select few scenes, but if you want to keep some arbitrary, is it true, is it not true in there, you can't have bad liars in movies. It just sucks. It's just bad acting at that point. So you just tell them that, it's true. And also, if you're writing a good movie, most of the time anyway, you want to clear everything up by the end? Probably not. So it's better if you leave it open anyhow.
Right.
But and I heard Sandra be interviewed and say that she said, do I play it, this way or the other? And apparently, from what I heard, Sandra said that Justine told her, just play it so she's innocent. Just do that.
The main thing for me was to say to Sandra, okay, play it like an innocent.
And that's fine.
Justine said that?
Yeah.
I thought she refused the...
Well, she did. She said,
she
said apparently, eventually Sandra asked her, because they never discussed it in any conversation when they got to set, she asked her or whatever. And Justine said, I'm not interested in this this question. This is not don't ask me this question. It's not interesting. Right. Just play it so she's innocent. But that's the safe thing to do. Because if you play it so she's guilty, then it's obvious and it sucks.
Yeah, right.
So at least to
right.
have her conceal something, at least have that, because then there's a question about it. But if the moment you play it that she's guilty,
Yeah.
there's no question in it anymore, and it's shit. Like, it just sucks. There's no, the mystery is gone. So no, you can't play it like somebody's guilty.
When I read the script, I didn't have this question because I was on her side immediately because she was struggling so hard and I felt for her. And I admired the way that she's going through this with a calmness that is so, my English isn't enough, but I liked it a lot. I admired it. Then shortly before we started shooting, I felt like, wait a minute, maybe I'm completely on the right path because we never talked about it and Justine didn't seem interested in this question. So I asked her and she said she cannot answer it, she won't answer it, and I should play her as if she was an innocent, and it totally freaked me out. And then what I felt in the beginning was probably the more important thing, to be empathetic with her, to feel with her, and also to raise the question in the audience that was there all the time about how we feel about people and why, and what does draw us to them and what pushes us away from them, what information makes them sympathetic and what information we get about them. So all these things were more interesting to me than the question if she did it.
Yeah. You're gonna have somebody lie in a movie, they better be a good liar. Have them be a good liar, not a shitty liar.
Yeah, yeah.
In the same way that, like, if you're gonna write a conversation between two people and people are complaining or having an argument or whatever, you want the arguments to be well written. And if they're well written, they better be well reasoned. And if they're well reasoned, then the people having the arguments better have thought about it. It's not good enough to be able to write a screenplay and be like, oh, they're having an argument where they're not really making any decent points or anything because that's what their characters are. It's like, that's just a shitty argument. I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
That's my feeling about it anyway.
It's really rare to have such a character that is so rich, that is so modern also. I never saw somebody fight in that way, to have such good arguments, to be so reflected and so clear, to stand up for oneself.
I mean, that makes sense.
Which is not to say that you can't write an argument that doesn't make logical sense. Like, there's a great one in Eyes Wide Shut, famously, where Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, character Bill, they're sharing a joint and they argue in that bedroom scene, which is one of the best scenes of all time. For me, one of my favorite scenes I've ever seen. And apparently Nicole asked Kubrick on set, she was like, because she was finding problems in the logic of her character's argument that she was making. And she said, this doesn't make sense. That's not a good argument. And Kubrick said, Nicole, you're stoned. And he also said, and when people argue, sometimes they say the most ludicrous things, and sometimes they say the most truthful things.
Yeah.
He would say to me, Nicole, you should be a lawyer, because I would debate each issue of the scene and each issue of Alice's arguments. And sometimes I'd find flaws in her argument, and I would say, but hold on, no, we've got to fix this because I wanted to be right. And he said, the key thing here is, Nicole, you're stoned. It's not even a rational argument. You're not standing up in the court of law. He said, when people argue, they say the most ridiculous things. At other times, they say the most profound things.
And that's what it is. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be, there has to be some reasoning, even if it's flawed. You have to have felt that the character, and be able to tell that the character has thought about what they're arguing. You have to, otherwise it's just lame. So, yeah, and also Justine's made jokes like she might reveal what happens in 10 years, like in 10 years if she did it, or what really happened. But the reality is it doesn't matter what the hell she said.
Yeah,
it's not in the movie.
The whole film is
she can
about
give
the
her
question.
interpretation about what she's written, but just like everybody else, all you can give is your interpretation about what you've written.
Yeah.
That's it. It's only as valid as everybody else's.
Yeah.
When we were writing, it's not a question that we asked ourselves directly, or it's a bit strange, but it came a bit later. The way that I could answer the question at that time was, she might be 80% innocent or something, but it was not an exact science. And then recently I felt we went through the writing process in a way that we could end up being in the same position as Daniel. For me, it meant that we had to not know. He was the central point of the film in terms of knowledge, in terms of will to know. And so he has to decide, but we're in the same position.
I'm not somebody. I think writer's intent's bullshit. It's just that it's intent. If it's not in the film, then it doesn't count. Like, people are asking, like, people, if are the ghosts in The Shining ghosts, or are they? It's like, fuck off.
Yeah, for sure.
Stupid question.
And like speaking of Oscar-nominated films about like guilty or not, like we just had Tar.
Yeah.
One of the best examples of that.
Sure. I don't care what Todd Field has to say about his movie.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. Whether he tells me that she really did those things or she didn't do those things. Do you care? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's the same point. The point about this film at the end of the day.
And I'm sure Todd Field would agree.
Sure, yeah. I'm sure he would agree too.
And I'm sure that's why he hasn't said she's guilty or she's not guilty.
The point of this movie isn't to say, is she guilty or isn't she guilty? The point is that the lies within the marriage, the discomfort of the marriage and the lies of it have destroyed the family.
Yeah.
And they're blaming each other for, you know, whatever they've done and that whole thing. The point is that at the end of the day, they've ruined their kid's life and their own lives.
Yeah.
And, you know, she was disloyal. The husband didn't do what he said he was going to do. It's been unstable from the beginning, and as a result, the whole family is forever destroyed, and he's probably never going to be able to trust his mum for the rest of his life. That's the point. The point is that the lies have piled up too much, and everything's fallen. It's the anatomy of the fall.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's the fall of everything. It doesn't matter who did what. It doesn't matter if she killed somebody or not, really. Really, that's not the problem. The problem is that they've destroyed their kid's life because they're these two writers who are way too focused on being an artist and having an ego and blah, 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 and ignoring the fact that they've got a kid that they have to take care of and look after. And that's the point, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lies is the point. It's the same thing as Tar. It's like, doesn't, you know, whether, the point is she lied. It doesn't matter if she's guilty or not. It's like, you lied, you neglected your family.
Yeah, and
This
now your wife is gone. And,
Yeah, that's
you know,
it.
Your daughters don't trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, do these parents deserve for their son not to trust them or something like this is an interesting question. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. You reap what you sow, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say about it. You know, I don't think Sandra's a bad person, even if she did kill him. She's just a person, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree.
Yeah. And I don't believe that the father's a bad person if he committed suicide. He's just a person.
Yeah, it's interesting as well that, like, because apparently, I hope this isn't speculation, or like I've just heard this from a shit publication.
Sure.
But the inspiration for the title of the film was from another film called Anatomy of a Murder.
Yeah,
that
that's
came
true.
out ages ago. That is true.
The 1950s Otto Preminger, or whatever his name is.
The title of the film refers to a pretty well-known courtroom movie too.
Of course, yes. Yes, that movie is very important for me.
Talking about the Preminger film, of course, Anatomy of a Murder. Yeah.
I saw that movie 10 years ago, I think, and I'm very impressed by that movie because it's so modern, the way they are playing in the courtroom, you know. Not a model, like, a pattern for us, yes.
Right, yeah.
With Jimmy Stewart, James
Jimmy
Stewart.
Stewart, that's it.
You know, from Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
What the moon?
Oh, yeah.
He was like the biggest star of his day. But he's like this retired lawyer who comes back to do one final case type thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the poster's similar too. If
Yeah.
you know the Anatomy of a Murder poster
like-
with all the sliced up dirt.
It's like, yeah.
And like the same thing, slightly with the guy on the snow.
Yeah.
For sure it's
really
inspired.
cool.
Yeah.
And I like that with this one, you can't call it Anatomy of a Murder, and you can't call it Anatomy of a Suicide, because you're...
Yeah, it's of a fall.
Yeah, so it's like the fall.
Yeah.
And then, I've never read it as the way that you've said, like an anatomy in terms of the fall of the relationship.
Oh, it's and
but-
everything.
But,
yeah,
but
fall
I,
of them.
I think that's
everything,
like,
yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, it was always just like the literal fall.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
Do you believe she is innocent or guilty?
I don't know.
I really liked it.
Yeah, it was really great.
You know, it was just really,
loved
I
it.
was baffled. I had a hell of a week this week. Like, full disclosure, I watched, on Tuesday night, I watched Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the cinema Wednesday night and I watched The Zone of Interest.
There you go.
And I was just overwhelmed both nights. And I had a really good sleep afterwards for both of them.
I watched them both the same day. It was good.
How did you... That's...
I don't know. I was really sad after the movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I saw your Instagram story and you posted thoughts about both, and I was like, "Is this just
no
catch up?"
The same day. Yeah.
Holy shit!
I was hanging
had
out
a Sandra
for
Hüller film.
I did. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
When she was in Anatomy of a Fall, I didn't realize it was the same actress, and then I googled
Yeah,
afterwards. And
she
like,
does.
Oh,
she looks really.
It was her from.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell it was the same woman.
It's literally color grade
Yeah.
and makeup.
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
She looks like a different freaking person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you never really get a close up of her in Zone.
Oh, they don't wear any makeup.
It's kind of
Zone
always a.
so, yeah.
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 There you go. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
we'll talk about it.
Anyhow. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Wow. Oh yeah, something that I did really like, and it's similar in its theme. Tar never went about presenting Tar this way, but in Anatomy of a Fall, once it starts coming out that there's going to be a big court case, and you know, because she's, at least some people know her as an author, like it's going to be in the news and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of shots in a row that are shot like what you're seeing on the screen is the news program.
Yeah.
That takes up the whole, like it's not a shot of a TV showing the news program. The screen is the news program.
Yeah.
And I like that they kind of ease into it with that by at least one of the modes that they do it is they show Daniel being interrogated in the room and they have that shot of his face. And I was watching it and I went, the quality on this camera is like really bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then they pull out and it's like, oh, okay, this is a shot of a camera doing this.
Yeah.
And I really like that it fills up the whole screen.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, so now we're in the position of the general public.
Yes.
Hearing information about this.
Yes.
You know, and it's the same thing I said with Tara. I'll reiterate it again, but it's so prominent in modern culture that I'm going to talk about it again.
Yeah.
Is when we're general members of the public, we don't know.
Nope.
Just like these people.
Yep.
And so just to reiterate that with that motif and to put us in the, you know, the characters that are in the general public in that world, really important. And I thought it was super immersive to do it that way. And I really appreciated it. Because as soon as it happened and we put the characters not, you know, we aren't seeing them through a cinema camera, I felt really distant from them.
Yeah.
I didn't feel as close to them as I did earlier in the film.
Yeah, right.
And,
when you're on a 50 up in Sandra's face
exactly.
in the middle.
And it's beautiful
house.
filmic quality and it's like this, the lighting's gorgeous.
Yep.
When it's flat and it's freaking grayscale.
Yep.
I'm looking at, you know, images on a screen, which is interesting because it's like, well, that's what they were the whole time.
Yeah.
But you're reminded of that,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, here's an interesting thing as well. It's like, I saw this interview with Drake recently. I think Lil Yachty was talking to Drake, and maybe this is from this interview. I could be totally remembering it from another one, but someone, Lil Yachty or someone, asked Drake, he said, do all of the memes about you bother you? Because it seems like every 3 months there's a new Drake meme that's going viral and he's you know, getting made fun of or whatever. And Drake said something along the lines of like, well, to the general public, I'm just a caricature.
It's true.
So he said, so that character is theirs and who I am as a person is me. So like it was interesting to see them put in that kind of medium because it felt like Sandra's character became like a caricature for a second, like a cartoon character.
Yeah.
You know, like a guilty woman. She like fell into a profile and it became black and white for a second, purely because I was looking at what seemed like a news program.
Yeah.
Because we're so desensitized to it at the moment, because there's always, you know, bad things happening in the news, that it's just really easy to go and just make something really simple so you can think about your own life.
Yep.
Anyway, simple decision, super impactful for me.
Yeah.
I think it carried heaps of weight. And to have that before the court case, just before, was the perfect interlude into, okay, now you're going to be a jury member.
Yes.
And you're not going to be a family member trying to understand these people.
Yeah.
Really liked it.
I agree. Walks you very nicely into only having as much information as the jury would up until that point. It puts you in the mind frame of like, okay, this is what I'm going to be told now. Only as much as the people in the courtroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And not just script-wise, but you like really feel that way.
Yeah.
Because it just like hammers it home with the visuals.
Yeah, really, really nice.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to remember that. I'm so stealing that.
Yeah.
For later in my career.
There's lots of good stuff in that. With this is such a detour. It's a movie called Code Unknown, also by Haneke, and another movie called Benny's Video by Haneke, where like...
I was going to say, I thought you might bring up Benny's Video.
Yeah, Benny's Video does a lot of shooting television screens to remind you that you're watching a movie.
Yeah.
And then there's parts in Code Unknown where something will be being filmed and you're like, oh, cool. And then it'll pull out and you're like, oh, it's on a screen. And you won't know it before you start it.
That's
which
really
is
sick.
Really great. It's
yeah.
awesome.
Technically, to pull that off too, it's
fantastic.
Super impressive.
Yeah, it's great. Or he'll just do a cut sometimes, but whichever way you do it is great because it's like, oh shit, we were 5 minutes into this scene and now it's not even real.
Yeah.
Type thing. It's great. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be done. I don't know about
you.
you.
Absolutely.
Cool.
There you go. And you guys watching at home, you're watching this on a screen. You're not in the room with us.
It's true.
Interesting.
Don't tell him that.
Oh, true. We're here. I'm coming at you. No, look at that. You're safe. It's all good. Well, thank you for listening. This was the Anatomy of a Fall episode. Guys, go see it again. I'm going to.
Yeah.
It's freaking amazing.
Needs a couple watches, this one.
Yeah, at 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I'm excited to do it, to watch the early events in the story after having seen some of the recounts from the Son later on to see if they hold weight, you know, or like see if it's like that tight that you can do that. But yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Wherever you're listening, give us can you even give a thumbs up on Spotify?
I think you can. Or you can like it.
Oh yeah, like it.
Like the episode. I think you can comment on Spotify too.
There you go.
So
leave us
a comment.
Tell us your thoughts on this, and we will argue with you in the comment section.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be good. Yeah, let's just wind each other up.
Yeah, sounds
and
good.
Don't forget to follow us on Spotify. Follow us on Instagram.
Yep.
Calligram.pictures. Give us a like on YouTube and a comment and a share. And we appreciate you. And we're here at the end of the episode. So, hey, thanks for listening to the whole thing.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.